Welcome, everybody, and welcome to this DreamWakers Daily Conversation. I'm so excited to be joined today by Jenny Sichel, who is a rowing athlete. She serves as the coxswain for the Paralympic and national teams, who have won 4 silver medals at the World Rowing Championships and also the 2016 Rio Paralympics. Jenny also works as a coordinator at Link 20, which is a global movement for young activists with and without disabilities who are passionate about social justice and raising awareness on the rights of people with disabilities to be fully included in our society. So Jenny, it's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions.
Definitely. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad. To start us out, for those of us who aren't familiar with the world of rowing, could you give us a quick overview of the sport and what it means to be a coxswain?
Yeah, so rowing is one of those sports that is often associated with being like elite or just like upper class, upper echelon type of thing. But in reality, it's for anyone. You could start rowing like at the age of 9, 12, whatever it might be. And you can row until, I've seen like 93-year-olds rowing. So it's one of those sports where it's on the water. You can have anywhere between one person in a boat to 8 people in a boat and a coxswain. And it's all about, when you have more than one person, it's all about teamwork and unity. And that includes the coxswain position in this. And so as a coxswain, most people think coxswain and either, one, have no clue what it means. 2 are like, oh, so you're like that person that shouts, row, row. Or 3 are like, oh, you're the coxswain. That kind of thing. But in reality, what a coxswain does is I like to explain it in kind of 3 different ways. So we coach. We're kind of the in-the-boat coach. And I can feel what's going on in my boat and which rowers are not doing something the way they should be, which rowers aren't in sync with one another. And so I tell them exactly what to change to make the boat move faster while we're rowing. So that's one thing that I do. And then the second thing is I motivate. And with motivating, it's especially prominent in a race situation where it's really all about giving the athletes information. Because with a little bit of motivation on the side, because really the information is the motivation part of it. In the sense that, you're going down a race course. Athletes in rowing are facing backwards when they row. Mm-hmm. So they can't see where they're going. As a coxswain, I can. And so I can see how far they are in the race. I can see who's next to us, where the other boats are. By relaying that information to them, they can create a mental picture and say, okay, I need to push harder now. And that's kind of the main motivation for them to be able to get down the race course. Now, with that being said, there are definite, do it for this, do it for that, like that kind of motivation. But that, I would say, is like 5% of coxing. Mm-hmm. And the motivation aspect of coxing in specific. Mm-hmm. So, and then the third thing I do is I actually steer the boat. Because, believe it or not, in a boat, you have to steer to go straight. Unless every single rower is perfectly in sync with one another and pushing at the same exact pressure at the same exact time, there's going to be some variation. And so my job as a coxswain, especially in the sprint shorter races, is making sure that the boat stays straight down the course because I don't want to add any extra meters onto the race course. Mm-hmm. Or any extra meters onto what a rower is doing during the race. So those are like the 3 main things that I do, and sort of organizing just practices, making sure that the rowers know that I'm an athlete too, and kind of walking that fine line between athlete and coach. So it's a really interesting position, and I swear at the end of races, I am just as exhausted as the rowers. And it's not necessarily like physically exhausted, it's just my brain just shuts down completely. Just like, I'm done, see ya, peace.
Wow. Well, it sounds like a really important position, for sure. You've got a lot on your shoulders. I'd love to talk a little bit about how you got into it. So you were rowing at Bryn Mawr College. You rowed on the varsity team as a freshman and a sophomore, and then you had an injury that changed your path, and that's kind of when you decided to be a coxswain. So I'm wondering, what was that decision like to transition from being a rower to being a coxswain?
So it's actually really interesting because when I was in, and I'm just going to start a little bit backstory, but when I was in high school, I remember senior year, I was like, oh, I'm going to Bryn Mawr College. I'm going to join the rowing team. And one of my teachers was like, oh, I was on the rowing team in college. Oh, you're like a great coxswain. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go row. And he's like, oh, okay, because I'm short, I'm boxy. And so then I get to Bryn Mawr, and I go down to the tryouts, and I walk down, and they're like, oh, you must be, and they didn't say coxswain, and I was like, hi, I'm here for the rowing team. And they're like, okay. And so I got on the erg, and they were like, oh, she's actually pretty strong. Okay, we'll have her row. And so it was kind of like, I always had wanted to be a rower, and when I was a rower, I didn't want to be known as a coxswain. I wanted to be like that badass rower that's like 5'3", 110 pounds, like pulling my weight in the boat. But eventually, I mean, I did get injured as a rower. And honestly, by that point, I had fallen in love with the sport and fallen in love with the teamwork that it takes. And so I think after my injury, I painted like every single oar in the boathouse like 5 times at least because I couldn't go on the water as a rower. I didn't have any coxing skills. And my coach was like, you still want to be a part of it? Okay, you could be a coxswain. And it was really, I just really still wanted to be a part of the team. And I still wanted to do something with the team. And I do like bossing people around, so it was kind of fun to begin with. But really, once I got into it and realizing how much sort of a mental challenge it is, it definitely just clicked, and I fell in love with it. And like, would I want to be a rower still? Yeah, probably. But do I absolutely adore being a coxswain and have respect for all coxswains and what we do? Yes. Oh my God. And I love it so much. So it was kind of an easy transition because I couldn't row anymore competitively. And I still wanted to be a part of the team.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful story because it just goes to show you that life sometimes throws some twists and turns at you, but you can still get through it,
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about your rowing, or rather your coxing now. So you cox in an adaptive boat. So I'm wondering how that might be different from what you were doing in college to what you're doing now.
So I would say that actually coxing for para-athletes has made me a better coxswain because I've had to become a lot more specific with what I say. When I first transitioned over into para-athletics, it was my senior year of college, and like outside of college I was doing this. In college I was still coxing for Bryn Mawr, and I remember being like, I went to my first sort of development camp for the national team, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, what do I say? Like, do I do something differently? Like, how do I interact with these people? I've never like interacted with people with disabilities. And in reality, it's generally the same. I don't treat my athletes any differently than I would if they were able-bodied versus disabled. And I think, if anything, like I said, it had made me a better coxswain because I have to be able to verbally tell them exactly what I want and not assume that they can see something. Not assume that they know exactly what I'm talking about. Not assume that like they can use both feet to get into the boat. It's just one of those things where I've become a lot more direct with my wording and a lot more specific when I do cox. So, and it's also interesting because I went from a 2,000 meter course down to a 1,000 meter course in para initially. And that was actually really difficult because a lot of times when you're a coxswain in a 2,000 meter course, it's about 7-8 minute race, and you try to find words to fill the space. Whereas in a 1,000 meter course, every single word that you say has to be so specific and so pointed because you have 3 minutes to finish a race.
Wow.
And so, like, my race in Rio was 3 minutes long.
Wow.
And it's just one of those things, like, after Rio, it changed to 2K, which also threw me for a loop then, because I had been so used to doing 1Ks. It's really interesting, but generally, I would say, if anything, like, every single person should, or coxswain should cox an adaptive boat at some point in their lives, just because you really learn about boat feel, you learn about specifics, you learn how to use your voice appropriately.
That's great. I'd love to talk about now, because of course we're living in a pretty unique time with the global pandemic around us, and there's been a lot of unexpected challenges for everybody. And thinking about you, there is the postponement of the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics. So I'm wondering, how have your plans changed now that 2020 is upon us, and how do you kind of overcome those hurdles and those setbacks in your life?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I'll kind of start with your second question first, I think.
Sure.
But I definitely think that, like, there are a lot of hurdles and setbacks, especially when you're at the national team level, because nothing's ever guaranteed. You can't take anything for granted. Like, you never have a spot on your team every day. You're competing. Even when you make it, you're competing. So with that being said, going up, looking at Tokyo, you kind of take that mentality into it, and it was kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, in the sense that you felt a little lost because you're, like, so prepared and so mentally ready to get back into the game and, like, get back on the water, get prepared, kick up training again, because we were just coming out of the winter season, which is actually my down season. So I was ready to, like, get back on the water full time, go at it, and then it got delayed, and in one regard, it gives us another year to prep, another year to get faster. In a different aspect of it, it is putting in a full another year of training, which is a lot. I mean, you give up a lot, you do a lot when you're at this level. Like, you give up birthdays, you give up weddings, christenings, whatever you want to call it. But so it's really kind of like made me think whether or not I do want to do this for a full another year. And that's been sort of on my mind. And right now, the answer is absolutely yes. And it's because I just love what I do. And I love what I'm doing. And if I can adapt in some way, shape, or form to make it any easier or any more sort of palatable in my mind, I will. And that's really, when it comes down to it, when something goes wrong, when something happens, it's all about adapting to what you're thinking, adapting what you're doing. And that's something that, from every setback I've had, it's just been like, okay, well, this sucks, but there's definitely going to be something good that comes out. I just have to adapt the way that I'm thinking to look at it. And so my motto is that I'm a viewer of the gold lining, because I'm sick and tired of silver. So it's all about the gold lining now. But there's always a gold lining someplace, and it's all about how you look at it. So
Yeah, I love that, the gold lining. I'm going to start using that.
done with silver. Like, I'm so done with silver.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk more about you, because in many ways, sports benefit a person more than just the physical fitness aspect of it. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear about you and how maybe you found yourself finding new traits and skills that you've developed through coxing.
So it's really kind of fascinating, because with coxing, I have had to, with rowing in general, at this level, you don't make much money from it, especially in the Paralympic side. So I've had to work other jobs as well. But recently I realized that being able, as a coxswain, I have to bring together 4 totally unique people. Unique in physicality, unique in gender, unique in personality, and that ability to bring together 4 people, work together with 4 people, and kind of compromise, be a bouncing person to bounce things off of, and really be able to get your point across to each and every person who thinks totally differently. That is 100% something that I am just realizing has come out of coxing. And I really use it every day. I use it with my roommates. I use it with my colleagues at work. And it's really about something that I've taken away, is some people are math majors. Some people are English majors. You're not going to tell an English major to go row like a parabola, and you're not going to tell a math major to row like a haiku. It just doesn't work. And so that sort of adaptability has really come out of rowing and taken away from sport in general to bring into my daily life, I guess, outside of sport, that sort of resiliency in a way.
Yeah.
So.
That's really great. It can't be understated, how important of a skill that is.
Oh my God.
I would love to talk, too, about your time at Bryn Mawr College, because you actually majored in math. And I'd love to hear about how you decided to kind of take your passion from rowing and turn that into, becoming who you are today. And, was it an easy decision? Was there a part of you that thought, ooh, maybe I should do something with this math degree? What was that like for you?
Okay, so do you want the true answer or no? So I don't know if this is the best answer, but I actually became a math major because I wanted to study abroad. And it was the day abroad applications were due, and I hadn't turned in my I hadn't been assigned a major yet, and you had to have a major advisor's signature to study abroad, to apply. And I was like, oh, geez, what am I going to major in? And it was either math or chemistry. And I knew I could do anything with a math major, so I became a math major. But so in reality, I didn't always have my mind sort of set on math. I love it. But it actually made it a lot easier. I wanted to become a veterinarian out of college.
Wow.
And so it actually made my decision a lot easier to sort of up and move all over the U.S. for training and really pursue this dream that I've had. I was freaking 6 years old, and what 6-year-old does this? But I remember, I'm going to date myself here. Nancy Kerrigan, a figure skater, came on TV, and she was at the Olympics, and she said that she was 6 when she started figure skating. And my first thought was, oh my God, I still have a chance to go to the Olympics. So it's it's always been a dream of mine to do. And I saw this opportunity. I saw this love and desire that I had. And it really just I couldn't see myself doing anything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was pretty easy to decide to do it. And it's been a crazy journey since.
I'm sure, yeah. But that's actually a really great story because, a lot of our students that we serve are really nervous about, going to college, choosing a major. They think it might just be, that's it, that's the path they have to follow. And it truly is not for a lot of people. So I'm actually really glad that you could share that answer with us.
It's a little okay, yes, I did not choose major the way someone normally does. I was such a math poser. I went to every single problem session, but nobody has to know that.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about DreamWakers. We're very passionate about role models and mentors, and we believe that students learn from someone who shares a similar story to them, that they will be inspired to dream big about their own futures and their own goals. So I'm wondering how mentorship has played a role for you in your life, and if there were any role models that you looked up to growing up.
Oh, there you're back.
Hi. Oh my goodness.
Hi.
Did we get frozen there? That's fine. We can edit
Yeah,
this.
it's been a while.
Okay. Whoop. I'd say that's perfect that we're in between questions because I can just cut that right out.
That was like perfect timing to freeze.
Actually, perfect timing. Okay, great. Well, I will just go back into it. So, at DreamWakers, we're really passionate about mentorship and role models, and we really believe that when students can hear and learn about the stories of people like you, that they'll be really inspired to think about their own futures and dream big. So I'd love to hear about the role of mentorship in your own life, if there were any mentors or role models that you really looked up to.
Yeah, so I think in each of my different sort of segments of life so far, I've had almost changing mentors because I think my environment has changed so much and my mindset. So it keeps sort of changing. I haven't had like one person that I'm like total role model of. But when I was in high school, it was my marching band director. And just, I loved just like he was kind of a mentor in the sense that he would push everybody in the marching band to their limits, and sort of knew how to do that, but still keep it fun and still keep it entertaining while we were doing it. And so I think what he really taught me was that I could go beyond my limits, and that I didn't have to set boundaries necessarily. And then sort of in college, actually, I would say my main mentor was, I mean, this sounds so corny, my mom and my dad, just because they were there for me during the hardest points in college, which there are always going to be hard points in college. Like, I went through a mental health struggle in college and challenge. And they were always there for me and showed me what real, like, full-on love and caring and really how to hold somebody up when they're down. And then out of college, actually, it's just been, with rowing, I didn't go immediately into like a training center or something like that. And so I actually traveled around the U.S. rowing with masters teams, which are age 21 and up. And most of masters rowers are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's really just seeing the crazy amount of power that these women have, and just independence and strength, and like they all come from such totally different backgrounds, but they're able to come together in one boat. And so it's really just, I mean, specifically the masters women's teams that I've seen that have really been my role models and mentors. And because I really just, it's like, you can do so much, you can do what you want, and you can still be a strong, powerful individual. And they've kind of brought me into my own in a way where I now have full self-confidence. And they've kind of shown me the path after college where it's been like, okay, yeah, let's go hunt those people down on the race course. Like that kind of thing. While still being like, okay, we're going to go dress up and go out for a lovely dinner and like wear a nice dress and a skirt, whatever. So I think that's been probably kind of each step of the way I've had someone different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to think about.
Definitely. Yeah, it's awesome. And I love that you had so many different people. It really shows that you can find mentors and role models anywhere in your life, anytime. And I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to talk about your other job, Link 20, a little bit.
Right.
So it's all about raising awareness on the rights of people with disabilities. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate maybe a little bit more about what your role is. What do you do every day? And what is the work that Link 20 is doing?
So I'll start with like kind of the work that Link 20 is doing. But basically we are this sort of a global social movement. The younger generation of advocates, so like advocates 45 and under, although we don't really like, doesn't matter your age, if you want to be an advocate for the younger generation, great. And so it's the younger generation of advocates with and without disabilities. So you don't have to have a disability to be a part of the movement of people with disabilities. It's all about inclusion, and I think in some ways it's hard when you just have one specific kind of person advocating for their rights, but not other sort of backgrounds, other people doing it with them. So that's why we're sort of all about inclusion. And actually, Link 20 comes from linking the 20% of the population with disability to the 80% without. And so that's kind of what we do. We're mostly digital, I mean, especially right now. But so we have probably about 80% digital, and then we have in-person meetings in 4 different cities around the U.S. And so with that, we have like our leadership group, Leaders Core, and what they do, this specific, like these leaders, is they come together and they bring up these campaigns and ideas about what they want to advocate for. And then what we do is we're kind of like a backbone, or what I do, I should say, and 2 other colleagues of mine, we're sort of the backbone for them, and to kind of help push them towards seeing their dream become a reality, or seeing their advocacy goals become reality. And so, and the thought behind it is, you know, you get one person who wants to advocate for something, and then on their own, it's going to be a lot slower of a process. But if you all of a sudden have 500 people behind you saying, yeah, we're part of Link 20, it's going to be a lot faster process. And so what we've actually done, I mean, one of the things that we took part in was advocating for equal Paralympic medal payout, which prior to 2018, Paralympians got 1/5 of what an Olympian got for their medal. So like in Rio, an Olympian would get $15,000 for a silver medal, and I would get $3,500.
Wow.
And so we were actually part of the group of advocates all around the U.S. that pushed for equalizing the payout. And ultimately in October 2018, it got equalized. Retroactive back to 2018. So that was pretty cool to see. So that's one thing. Another thing is actually with Major League Baseball. We wrote to Major League Baseball and said, you're the only professional sports team that still uses disabled list. And it's like low-hanging fruit, like, but really wording and words matter. Can you please change this to injured list? And we got a letter back saying they would. 2019 season came, and it's now known as the injured list.
Wow.
So just things like that. Like right now we're working, well, not right now specific because of everything going on, but prior to the pandemic, we were working on an accessible air campaign, trying to get airports and airlines to become more accessible. Because it's like, I mean, you're sitting on an airplane and you can't understand what the overhead announcement is, and it just says announcement in progress on your screen, and you have no clue what's going on because you can't hear anything. So just like things like that people may or may not think about. And everything that we do is brought up by our advocates. So like, I don't bring up anything. They all bring it to me and they say, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. And like, we're getting, during this kind of online time, we're doing a bunch of webinars, a concert or 2. We just had a Paralympic panel last week. Like, so there's so many things going on right now that we do, and it's pretty cool to see, actually. I've been working with them for about 1.5 years now, and it's amazing what together we can do so much more.
Yeah, that's really, really inspirational. I love hearing those stories.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice maybe for students if they're watching this and maybe they're really moved by Link 20's message or some other social justice campaign? Do you have any advice about how they can be advocates and how they can help make that change happen?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much to become an advocate. Like, you can speak out. You can write something to your local newspaper. You can write something online. I mean, I think that there are definitely so many avenues to go about becoming an advocate. Search on Google, like advocacy groups. Maybe you want to become a mental health advocate. And so you search on Google, like mental health advocacy groups, and then just email the leaders of these groups. Say, hey, I want to be a part of your group, or Facebook message, or I don't even know what people do these days. But really, that's like, and if you want to start your own advocacy group, like, go for it. Reach out to people that are maybe current advocates and say, hey, I'm looking to get into this. How, like, what have you done? How did you get started? Because I feel like a lot of people want to be able to give that message and, like, talk to people who are interested in something that they're interested in. I think very few times will you find a major advocate that doesn't respond to a message or says, no, sorry, I'm doing my own thing right now. Like, can we talk later? Thanks. Just because of the kind of background that it takes to be an advocate, and that motivates you to get into it. So, yeah, and I mean, if you want to become a part of Link 20, shoot me an email, go on our Facebook page, like, check out our Instagram. It's really, you can just follow an advocacy group, and you're an advocate. You're putting your voice out there. Kind of like voting in a way, like one vote counts, one advocate counts, one person saying something counts. So, because it adds up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's great advice. I love that. Every voice does count. You're right.
I like to think so, at least.
It's true. It is. We have time for 2 more questions. So this one is kind of about your life, because it sounds like you have a lot going on. Obviously, if training were happening right now, you'd be doing that. You'd have your job at Link 20. So I'm wondering, how do you balance it all? How do you find time to spend some time with yourself and maybe focus on hobbies or other things?
I think that prior to Rio in 2016, I didn't balance it, actually. And I had no social life. I would go to the boathouse in the morning at 5 a.m. for 5 a.m. practice, and then I would leave at 8 p.m. And that was my entire life. But after Rio, I made a pledge to myself that I was going to become more social. I was going to take more time for myself, no matter, like, at whatever cost. And so even with full-on training, like, it might be that, I don't do something, or I leave work early one day just to get a couple hours to myself. Or, like, on a night out, instead of going to bed on Friday night or Saturday night, maybe I don't have practice Sunday morning, instead of just going to bed, I kind of like, Jenny, come on, second wind, like, you can do this. And just go out for dinner with my friends in that way, and really make a conscious effort to become more social and not just sit in my room and sleep in the time when I'm not training or working or whatever. So, and even if that includes, it could be a Saturday morning. I do a training session Saturday morning. I go out for coffee with my friends afterwards, like my rowers afterwards. To me, that's taking time for myself and being social. And really doing what I want to do. So, yeah, I think it definitely, like, you have to figure out how to balance, like, balancing your homework and doing a sport, or classwork and doing a sport. It's that same exact concept of time management, where you're not just going to faff around a little bit, unless that's kind of what you have planned and you're making conscious effort to faff around. So...
Yeah, that's great advice. That's something we hear a lot on these conversations as well, that, the free time doesn't just fall in your lap. You have to make that conscious effort. And I think that's important for people to know.
It's so important, too, just to give yourself free time.
Yeah.
And be okay with it.
Definitely.
It's just one of those things where it's going to make you so much more productive in the long run if you give yourself, like, an hour every day.
100%. Yeah, that's great advice. Well, we have just one more question for you. It's kind of about the theme for this week, because we themed it all around sports, and for a lot of reasons. I mean, summer is coming up and we want to get excited for that. Obviously, sports are just really cool, so there's that. But we're also kind of finishing up a really tough school year for these kids, and it's a huge win that they could get to the end here despite all the challenges. So I'm wondering, how do you celebrate a win, and do you have any advice for these students as they finish up this particularly challenging school year?
So, yes and yes. So I celebrate a win Usually I'm just like, I don't even know. I have, right after I win, I have like the biggest smile on my face. In rowing, we throw the coxswain in the water, which you probably shouldn't do. But for high school, college, whatever it might be, like, anyways. But I kind of like do it on my own in a way. I celebrate on my own. I just like either sit in my room or something and just kind of, sounds so silly, but I like squeal and I'm like, oh, like that, something like that. And then advice, I would say, I mean, you can see it now, but I've seen this in rowing too, and any sport at this level, but enjoy the journey, because you're not always guaranteed the finish line, and the pomp and circumstance that you maybe have earned and deserve, but you're not always guaranteed it. And so really enjoy what you're doing along the way, because it's all about that. Take it day by day and don't take anything for granted. Like, enjoy what you're doing, and get that cherry on top of your ice cream sundae, great. But if not, be proud of what you've done and just keep going and keep pushing yourself forward.
That's great advice. Thanks so much for sharing. And Jenny, thank you so much one more time for taking the time to sit down, answer all of these questions. I really loved today's conversation. I thought it was very insightful. For everyone who's watching, we stream these every day at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'd love for you to stop in and see what the rest of our Dream speakers have to say as we finish out the school year. And if you ever miss them, we post them on our Facebook page and also our YouTube, so you can watch them after the fact. But that's all the time we have for today, unfortunately. I hope everyone has a great day out there, and we'll see you next time.